Welcome back to Studio King Street in the heart of Stirling, and I'm absolutely delighted today that I've got a friend of the building, Mr. Steve Cornwallis from Cornwallis Business Services. Steve is a business owner, investor and advisor based here in Stirling, has been for many, many years, and I'd like to say welcome. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much, and Neil. It's delightful to be here, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I hope I can stand up to what we're going to talk through. But yeah, thank you. It's delightful to be here, and I love this place, and I love you guys. So yeah, it's been really nice to get to know you guys over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's great, Steve. So the reason why we brought Steve along today, as we've mentioned, with regards to the content of this business podcast, we're looking for diversity, we're looking for business owners, we're looking for business leaders and business institutions that are helping businesses in the local area in Stirling and the Forth Valley. You've got a really unique story, I think, Steve, in that you started out in corporate like a lot of us, a good successful corporate career, decided one day to become a business owner, but you've diversified into many sectors and many industries, and I'll let you explain to the audience in terms of what you've done there. But what I really like about your story is kind of in the latter years you've kind of pivoted to taking more of an advisory role with young entrepreneurs and experienced entrepreneurs, whether that be on a consultative basis, advisory, mentoring, coaching. And I really like that about what you've done in terms of how you've evolved your brand and what you now stand for. So why don't we start by just kicking off and tell us a little bit about your background and where you've come from.
So, wow. I know we've only got a limited amount of time. So, I guess I left school at 17, went straight into the workplace. So back in 1981, in those days, when you were applying for jobs, you sent letters. Actual letters, so you wrote letters, you sent letters, and you made phone calls. I was very driven by the time I left high school, due to some personal stuff that was going on with my family at the time. Parents had split up and all that kind of stuff. So I was a very driven young chap, and I got very kind of motivated at the age of 17, just approaching my kind of 18th birthday, to find a job, get a job, make money, get a driving license, get a car, all that kind of early focus stuff. So that's exactly what I did. So in kind of anticipation of this conversation today, I was trying to remember how many letters I wrote back in 1981, and it was around about 40. So I applied for about 40 jobs. I remember, but I don't know why, but I applied for a job at Burton's Biscuits. I can't even remember what it was. I came out of school with a few O-levels, a few hires. I was Mr. Average at high school. I was always pretty good at English. I think that probably came from my mum, who was an English teacher. But the rest of it, I was a middle of the road kind of guy, and I just wanted a job. So I applied for lots of jobs, and I got a job with a company called Tilcon, a construction company, which later became Tarmac and Anglo-American, etc., etc. So I started working in a quarry 2 weeks before my 18th birthday.
Wow. Okay. So this is the first time that you've done a podcast, but it's not the first time on camera, right? What made you not choose a film career after your wonderful kind of background in film?
My goodness, that's a great question. So just so that folk know, I think Neil's alluding to the fact that I was in Gregory's Girl because I grew up in Cumbernauld as an extra. We just spent a bit of time talking about that. No, I just wanted a job, any job. As I say, I was very driven. I think I'm still as driven today as I was then, actually. A slightly older, perhaps slightly slower version of myself than I was then. But yeah, so I got a job working in a quarry 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, as I say, and I stayed in that company for 27 years. Wow. So I literally... I remember the very first day I went into the quarry. It was a massive mining operation in central Scotland. I lived about 13 miles away. I had no driving licence at the time. I literally started on the bottom rung, and I just worked my backside off to develop my career within the business. So yeah, 27 years with that business. I could spend a lot of time going on about that, but clearly that's not going to be very beneficial. The main thing about that journey was it was an extraordinary personal development journey for me. I was in there as a workie, and several years later I became the quarry manager on that site. So I was then managing people who I had worked alongside for many years. I think the other thing, it was a bit of a baptism of fire. Young lad, 17, didn't smoke, didn't gamble. I'd like to say didn't drink, but that wouldn't be quite telling the truth. Within 4 weeks, I was doing everything that all the other guys were doing. It was just, but that was an amazing experience in terms of, it's a bit like, I talk about this, it's a bit like when you're in primary 7 and then you go into high school for the first time, and now rather than being the big guy, you're the wee guy again. Yeah. Imagine a 17-year-old kid going into a big quarrying operation, dump trucks, loading shovels, big, hairy blokes, at all sorts of ages, and the experience I had there was absolutely fantastic.
So, wow, okay, so 27 years with Tarmac, and you decided to go out on your own. So what was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, it didn't quite happen like that. It happened on a more natural basis than that. I've kind of come into business ownership-y stuff very late on in my career. The very first thing I did on my own, so to speak, was in 2003. My dad owned some properties in Cumbernauld, and he was encouraging me to buy one. And I bought a flat. I had a bit of cash, and I bought a flat. Did it up, and that was my first kind of experience of doing my own thing. And I think I really got a spark at that point in time. Whilst I was still working for, I hope none of the bosses are listening to this, I'm sure they wouldn't mind anyway, but whilst I was still working for Tarmac, I bought a flat, and I was actually renovating it myself. You have to do what you have to do in those days. And I then started generating a rental income from that, and I thought, okay. And that was probably the trigger. We now own 10 properties, so that was the starting point, and from 2003 we've kind of built that up. But the real trigger for getting into the small business environment and doing my own thing, so to speak, was more about when I moved on from corporate and moved into the small business world as an employee. So I moved from Tarmac, or Anglo American as it was then. I think that would have been the back end of 2008, something like that. And I worked for a company based in Edinburgh called Limpet Technology, which hadn't sold a thing. It had developed this piece of equipment called the Limpet system. A kind of a hoist with a brain, an intelligent hoist system, and I was absolutely blown away with how smart it was. And I was also absolutely blown away by the applications that I could see it being used on within the mining industry and all sorts of other things. By the time I'd moved on from Anglo, I was kind of reporting into the board of the company. I was in a very senior position. I think I'd been promoted something like 10 times over the 27 years. So I had really kind of, so I was in a pretty senior kind of thing. But in the corporate environment, this was my first venture into the small business world. And I really cut my teeth in that role. So I moved into that business as COO. They were looking for someone to come in and help them build a machine that could be sold in the marketplace. I'd become known as a bit of a supply chain procurement-y kind of guy by that time. I think I had a bit of a reputation for being pretty good at that stuff. And that's how I was recruited into that role. And then a year later, I became the CEO, and I ran the business for many years after that. And as I'm sure you'll probably know, we now own the company. So the previous owners of the business pivoted into kind of offshore wind, which created an opportunity for me to buy the business from them, which they very kindly agreed to sell to me. It's now based here in Stirling.
So that was the start. So obviously addressing the renewable sector with some of the applications of the technology that Limpet had, that was the reason, or the catalyst of getting you into renewables?
Absolutely. That was 2011. So a relatively early entrant personally into that industry in the UK. The industry's still relatively young, but it was really quite young then. We're only talking 14 years ago, something like that. Being in that role with a small company, a small independent company based in Edinburgh, and trying to sell to the big guys, because that's what we were doing. Our targets were organisations like Siemens, Allianz, EDF, the big multinational corporations. So a bit of a David and a Goliath scenario. But whilst I was in that role for many years, I met other small business owners and people who had started their own businesses and had not really been exposed to people like that previously. Bear in mind, this is only 15 years ago, something like that. And I was fascinated by these individuals and what they had done. And to cut a very long story short, I decided to give it a go. So in 2015, one of the chaps that I'm actually thinking about, who was a client of ours, of Limpet, he and I set up a rigging company down in the Midlands in 2015, and the business started really well. That was our first kind of main operational business, but we had some challenges with it, and the whole thing kind of broke down a couple of years later. I learned so much through that 2-year period. I could write a book just on that alone. And it was really from that, without even realising it, that I kind of ended up with these 3 rules in terms of any future setting up or investment in business that I did. 3 things would have to happen for me to be able to commit to it. So a great learning experience. And kind of from there, 2015, I then set up a business in 2016, a recruitment company, which has been very successful, still running, based here in Stirlingshire, a company called Bespoke Resourcing Solutions. The guy that I own that with, 50-50, a guy called Darren Perry, we met as dads on the side of the rugby pitch at Stirling County. His son and my son went to school together at Stirling High. And to cut a long story short, we went into business together, and it was an absolute success, a financial success. The business broke even in the first year, and in year 2 and 3 had fantastic financial results with 4 people. And that really gave me the confidence now. So I've now got kind of experience, and now I've got confidence of success by kind of, I don't know, maybe 2018, something like that.
So why diversify even further beyond that? Because it looked like you had some success in renewables, you had success in recruitment, and then you started to branch out into other business areas instead of doubling down on what you were focused on. So just to get that perspective.
Yeah, great question. The answer to that question is I didn't really plan or set out to diversify per se. It has all happened naturally.
By chance.
It really has all happened. By chance, maybe by chance. It's been bumping into people, having conversations. I am a big fan, believer, call it what you will, of networking. It became quite clear to me, I think, from quite an early age, probably in my kind of mid to late 20s, that talking to folk and listening to folk was a good thing to do. And I've continued to behave like that my whole life. I was brought up in a fairly kind of strict family environment, but it was a good, strict family environment where you always said please and thank you, good manners, all that kind of stuff, and I've carried that forward through my career. I don't take anyone or anything for granted ever. It's something I talk about to people all the time, even people that I've known my whole life. And I have kind of set values for myself that I stick to quite rigidly. So I conduct myself in a manner that I deem to be the way I think I should be conducting myself, and I would wish others to be conducting themselves. And I kind of hang around folk who are like that, and I kind of bump into folk who are like that, and those who are kind of different to that or whatever, they go and play in other places and I play over here. So we have, you're quite right, we now have, as we sit here in 2025, we have a very diverse portfolio of companies. And they have all happened slightly differently, but they've all happened due to the fact that I am a serial networker. I connect with people during the day. I connect with people in the evenings, as you know, spend a lot of time in the evenings out with folk and kind of doing a lot of businessy type stuff there.
So how many companies within the conglomerate now?
Yeah, it's quite incredible when I think about it. When somebody asks me this, we now have 12 companies in the business. In the portfolio, I'm starting to call it a portfolio now. So there's 12 companies in the portfolio. Half of those work in the renewables industry. So they are predominantly kind of operational nuts and boltsy type businesses. So a couple of recruitment companies, and those recruitment companies recruit into operational sectors, logistics, construction, renewables, etc., etc. It's very much my kind of background. We have a wind turbine servicing company, which we set up in 2018, a very successful but small wind turbine servicing company. So we have guys out in the field.
Is that an extension to Limpet, or is there something totally different?
No, it came about as a result of Limpet because I was bumping into people who were running independent service providers like KRS, and that was how I became aware of the market and the opportunity. The business is 2018, so it's pretty established now. Wind turbine servicing business. More recently, over the last kind of 3-4 years, I've been getting a lot more into kind of heat renewables. What do I mean by that? Excuse me. Air source heat pumps, solar panels, battery storage, property, energy efficiency stuff, both on a domestic and an industrial scale. And as you're probably aware, we've just recently taken a stake in an emerging industrial solar installer based down in Cambridgeshire, which we're very excited about. That business is absolutely flying. One of the businesses that we have here in Scotland is now invested in that business down south and taken a pretty reasonable equity stake in that business, and it's really thriving. So yes, and in terms of 12 businesses, that's a lot of businesses. People ask me a very obvious question: how do you run those? I don't. I don't. I run a couple of them directly, including one consultancy business, which is essentially just me. And I run Limpet Technology, which in many ways is a bit of a baby thing for me. But all the other businesses are run by my business partners. We employ, here in Scotland, we somewhere between 45 and 50 full-time staff in what I would call proper career prospect jobs. The real jobs.
Across
jobs
all companies.
Across all the businesses. The businesses they're all different. They're all financially strong, and they all operate in markets which are growing rapidly. To give you an example, I think the last kind of public survey that was done in the renewable sector in Scotland was in 2022. And I think it was identified then that there were around about 47,000 people working or whose salaries were dependent on the renewable sector in Scotland, something like that. The projection for 2030 is that could be anywhere between kind of 75 and 90, something like that. So it's almost kind of double. Whether it'll reach that number or not isn't really that important to me. What's important is that that's the direction of travel that the industry is going in. And I think something like 75% of those jobs are in the wind energy sector, onshore and offshore. There is a massive investment going on around the coast of Scotland on new offshore wind assets. We are heavily focused on that sector going forward.
So if we turn the attention a little bit to the giving back, element of what you do, Steve. I'm not talking about third sector charity.
Sure.
I'm talking more specifically about, imparting your knowledge, helping entrepreneurs, helping business owners from a mentor and coaching perspective. What got you into doing that, and how important is it to the core values of what you now represent?
The second one is probably the easiest one to answer. It's absolutely, I know you know the answer to that question. It's absolutely fundamental to me, who I am and what I do and how I function. It's stuff I care about. So yeah, I love doing that is probably the first thing to say, or I love being recognised as someone who can be helpful in that regard. In terms of the answer to the first part of the question, in terms of, how I have kind of got into that, again, it has happened in a very natural manner. I'm an old guy now. I'm 62 in November. I've been around industry a very long time now. Bearing in mind I started when I was 17, so it's 40 odd years, whatever it is. And I know a lot of people, and a lot of people know me.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of found myself perhaps over the last 2 or 3 years, both in terms of supporting my own, business partners, co-directors, owners and stuff like that, because that's the role that I play, as well as providing funding, because I'm also an investor. But that kind of happens quite naturally. But what I have discovered over the last couple of years is I'm now finding people from outside our organisations who perhaps have come across me or have come across one of my colleagues, coming to say, look, can we have a chat about something? Sometimes I'll do that on a commercial basis and charge for it, and sometimes I'll do it, kind of free gratis. It really depends on the circumstances. So I have my own Cornwallis Business Services, as a kind of coaching, mentoring business thing. And in many ways, if you look at my profile on LinkedIn, you'll see Cornwallis Business Services, kind of investor, advisor and owner guy. And that very much is a kind of front end of who I am, what I do, and all the other stuff that goes on in the background. So it's a kind of conduit or a feeder into our organisations. So yes, I love what I do. I can't tell you how much I love what I do. I also love how much of my day I get to spend around amazing people. I mentioned we have between 45 and 50 full-time staff. We probably have another between 10 and 20 associates, contractors who are regular participants in our business agendas. The caliber of the people that I'm surrounded by is just mind-blowing. Present company not excluded. I love to spend time with people like yourself, talking about the things that we do and doing the things that we do. It's a fantastic way to get to spend time.
So what next? So I've heard of something called the Green Skills Training Academy. What impact do you think that's going to have, and what is it, and what impact do you think it's going to have on the local community and the Forth Valley in general?
Massive impact. I wish we were able to have a session just on the Green Skills Training Academy. This is the newest addition to the company portfolio. So it's a company called Green Skills Training Limited, and we set it up about a year ago, something like that. Myself and one of my other business partners, a lady called Tina Coviello. She and I own another training organisation called Progressive Pathways together. It is, as the name may suggest, completely focused on the renewables industry. And it is a brand new training centre, so it's a physical location. It's actually just over the line in Clackmannanshire, but it's part of Forth Valley, the Myatt Industrial Estate, and we have a 5,000 square foot unit there. and it is going to be a dedicated training centre for renewables skills. Predominantly, forgive the American phrase, blue collar, so hands-on roles. So there are 3 things we're going to do there. I say we're going to do there, we've already started. But there are 3 things that, there are 3 services that we're going to provide from that facility. One is we're going to have a GWO training facility element to it, and that's
GWO.
it's the Global Wind Organisation.
Oh, okay.
So it's the kind of organisation that oversees all the kind of accreditation, training, etc., in the wind industry. So it's very kind of wind specific. So it's working at height, manual handling, first aid, fire safety, all that kind of stuff. All the kind of stuff that people who want to work in the wind sector have to be able to have and do to be able to go into a wind farm. So that's a very kind of specific thing. Some of the training that takes place in there is not specific to wind. Working at height is not something that only happens in the wind sector. It happens in the construction sector. So it'll be generic from that point of view, but very, very focused on renewables and the wind sector. The second bit I'm going to call renewable heat. And that is the stuff that I think we talked a wee bit about earlier on. So that's solar, battery, air source heat pumps, CHP gas, kind of energy efficient pump boilers, EV charging. And what we're going to do there is we're going to train people on how to do that stuff, how to install all of that stuff, and how to service all of that stuff. So very hands-on. And then the third element is construction. So we'll be doing trades training there. We'd be doing the CSCS card. A lot of the kind of well-established kind of basic construction training things that people need to be able to get into the construction sector. We actually trialled this. We have another facility here in Stirling, about 6,000 square feet at Springcrest Industrial Estate. And we actually played around with this idea a few years ago. We actually built a room inside the industrial unit, the size of a bedroom. And we at that time had people out doing plastering. And rather than allow them to go into somebody's house and try it out for the first time, under supervision, of course, we actually brought them into the industrial unit and they could just plaster till their hearts were content until they had it right. Then we let them into the field. And I think that that's something that kind of idea has now evolved into let's just have some rooms and we can put windows in, we can put skirting in, we can paint them, we can plaster them, we can put electrics in. So if you imagine all the trades, joinery, electricians, all that kind of stuff. So I think we're going to have something there that's very unique in terms of that training centre. Certainly unique, I believe, in terms of Forth Valley.
But even on the building and construction side, are you going to try and lean that more towards kind of sustainability and green and recycled product and
we'll
those
do
elements?
both. We'll do both, but there's a kind of natural connection between the two, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
But we'll certainly do both. So those are the 3 things that we know absolutely we're going to be doing. And like all things in life, people will come along and say, what about this and what about that? And, we'll kind of evolve the idea from there. So very, very excited about that prospect. In talking to, people in the network around, local authorities, other business folks in Stirling, Clacks and Falkirk, there's a huge appetite not only for it, but to get involved in supporting it. So yes, I couldn't be more excited about that. Probably also just worth adding that it is very much the final piece in the jigsaw in terms of the renewables jigsaw for us. We have the wind stuff, we have the Limpet hoisty stuff, we have the insulation business, the solar business, all that kind of stuff. Being able to have a training organisation which not only can supply competent workers into our organisations, but also into external organisations, is very much the final piece in the jigsaw for us. I just couldn't be more excited about it.
I can definitely see a themed sustainability and renewables podcast being developed one day in this very room.
That would be fantastic.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our discussion, Steve. I really appreciate everything that you've shared, and I'm sure the audience will think the same. So now older, wiser, and very experienced in the world of business, and very strong focus in renewables, as we discussed. What would you say to your younger self if you are starting out again?
Golly. What would I say to my younger self if I was starting out again? I can't believe because I've been asked this question several times before. I'll probably answer it differently every time. Sitting here right now, probably not that much. And what I mean by that is, if I was advising someone relatively young, I don't know, someone in their 20s or someone coming into the workplace, which, happens on a regular basis. I've got two sons, one at 20 and one just about to turn 18 tomorrow, actually. And my eldest son works in one of our businesses. I would say two things. One, step forward. And two, do something meaningful with your time.
Okay, fantastic.
I would wish to elaborate on that just a little bit. Everyone wants their kids to be happy. And everyone wants everyone else to be happy, or mostly we do. But, that's not enough. For me, I think that for me, if you want to make the best of your life and have the maximum positive impacts that you can, step forward, do something, no matter how small, do something, say something. And if you can't think of something to say, just say something kind, make a positive move. And the second thing is, do something meaningful with your time. I didn't just make that up in the minute. That is a phrase that I've been using with my kids, boys, young men now, since they were very small children. Do something meaningful with your time. I believe that the most precious thing that we have, we all obviously love our families and our loved ones, but on an individual basis, I think the most precious thing that anyone has is time. And I was fortunate to realise that in myself in my 20s. And because of that, I've lived my life not wishing to waste not an hour or a day, a second. And I'm not talking about being reckless. I'm talking about making sure you make every second count, because you don't know how long you've got. I'm sorry if that sounds very morbid.
No, it's great advice to those young kind of budding entrepreneurs out there, right? It's a good mantra to have. Yeah. Fantastic. So where can people see more about what you do, your businesses? Is there a socials channel that you typically double down on?
LinkedIn would be the best place to find me. Stephen Cornwallis is the best place to find me. Most, if not all, of our businesses have websites, so if you're looking for any of the specific businesses, but if you were to reach out to myself on LinkedIn, I don't know whether we can publish some information afterwards.
Yeah, or whatever. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Absolutely, happy to help.
To be able to link.
Happy to help any way that I can.
That's great. Well, thank you, Steve. It's been fantastic, and I really appreciate you coming on to the Stirling Business Podcast and sharing what you've done with your life, and it's just fantastic, very inspirational. I'm very inspired. I'm sure the listeners out there will be in exactly the same way. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.